Don Williams, welcome back to the Soccer Queens podcast.
Hey, Erica, thanks again for having me on. What are we? Are we at three or four now? Something like that.
I have
Five?
no idea, maybe five actually. And it's so funny because I've been getting a lot of great feedback from your episodes. And I had someone the other week say that these episodes should be viral in the soccer community. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, everything you've said on each episode, how to get seen by colleges, some of the advice that you give as far as ID cams and video footage. I mean, it's so valuable. And I just love having you come on to talk everything college recruiting. So thank you again for being here.
Let's go.
Yeah, let's do this. So, a thing that's been coming up a lot with a lot of people I have discussions with on Twitter, some of the athletes I have worked with is when do you know that a college coach wants to truly commit to you? And when do you know that they're kind of half in and you're just getting a general email and they're not really pursuing you? So let's dive into this.
Yeah. Um, where to start? The answer is my favorite word, or at least the one I use the most. It's not those are my favorite, but it depends. There's so much that all of this depends on. So I think maybe we start at the beginning. Every college coach has either a virtual or many college coaches still have a literal board that they call a war board. So what they're doing is they're plotting out so that the staff can see at any given time the years and the positions that will be needed. And then they rank the players that are on their radar that they're pursuing. So if I am coaching and I have on my war board that I'm looking for a center back for 2024 and I have 8 players ranked on that board and we're going after our number one who's you know playing for Manchester United's youth academy, and our number two is a third backup on the U.S. national youth team, and number three is a really good player from a really good team, and number four is, and then you just go right down the list. Well, typically, like in all relationships, many of us don't want to settle for our third, fourth, and fifth pick of anything. So by the time we get to 4 and 5, quite often, we are at this point where, well, maybe they'll develop. They've got 6 more months before we have to make a final decision. Maybe this player will continue to develop. We will continue to track this player. So if you're getting a lot of, keep sending us your schedule, keep sending us film updates, it's the way of a coach keeping you on the hook, on the line. Keep coming to our camps. If they're being really specific, like, hey, you did really well. I saw your film. Thank you for your film. Keep sending us your schedule. It means usually that you're their third, fourth, or fifth pick, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth. It can go 10 deep. But by the time number one has committed to whatever, I'll just name schools, Stanford. Number two committed to UCLA. Number three committed to North Carolina. Number four committed to Florida State. Number five committed to Kentucky. Number six committed to Notre Dame. It's like, do I really want my third and fourth choice? But I can't throw this kid away yet. What if I really need them? And so they keep you on the hook. That's kind of how it works with most coaches. They have this selection criteria. They rank their players. They're on the war board, and then it's constantly moving. Now, number one could become number two if a better player comes in front of that coach. So that's what I've noticed, and that's kind of with SRUSA, kind of what we try to do with our clients is kind of slip them in to a coach's purview. Hey, I don't think you've seen this kid yet. And then that kid, we're hoping, goes up to number one on the war board. I come sometimes describe what we do is like your job is hiring somebody. They post the job posting. All these resumes start coming in. Now your best employee comes in and goes, "Hey, I've got a friend, or I know a guy, or I've got a cousin that I think would be perfect." And then they just hand the resume to the hiring manager. They look at it and they go, "Oh, yeah, I'll call them now. This looks great." And so the world of college soccer always works like that. It's just like in the real world, as I just described. And so uh, your favorite club coach calls, right, as a college coach, and your favorite club coach calls, or the guy you just took your A license with, who you learned you got to be good friends with during your A license, and they call and go, "I've got a kid, I've got a kid," and all these trusted sources start coming in with kids. So kids that are number one can be bumped down to number four, just like that, if better players come in front of them. So this is why kids uh, get this call on June 15th, right? After their sophomore year, they get this call from, I got one of my kids who got a call from Stanford on June 15th. And then he suddenly wondered why Stanford went silent. Why would they call me? Why would they spend this time? Why would they spend an hour with me and now they won't return my calls? Because they found somebody better. They were just putting you on the war board. They were just putting you up there. That's all. Your name was up there. And maybe your name was number one at one time, and now your name's number seven, based on what they saw, based on what they know. So, because kids get this all the time, why would a college coach reach out to me? Why would they be contacting me? Why would they have come and seen me? Why would they have evaluated me at their camp and now they're not interested? It's because they evaluated you and now they're not as interested as they were, or maybe not interested at all. But typically, you're still interesting, but you're not number one or number two.
So, what happens when you are number 1 or number 2 and they're ready to commit? Is that when they get the official visit invite? Is that a sign that, "Okay, I'm in, the school wants me"?
It's a really good sign, but it's not a sure thing. Uh, I have had players that have blown it on official visits, made a mistake. I had a player one time who mm, slightly had some fitness issues, goalkeeper. Happens sometimes with goalkeepers, had some fitness issues, and she kind of ordered all the wrong food on the trip. I mean, in front of the coach, can we go to this fast food place? And can I? And she's eating stuff the coach didn't appreciate, and she kind of blew the visit. And the coach said, you've already got some fitness issues, and I can kind of see your lifestyle, and I don't want to deal with that," and kind of blew it on an official visit. Flown in, put up, wined and dined, so to speak, and she kind of blew it. That can happen. I think it's pretty rare. Kids have been known to get all excited and drink on visits and then blow it. So you can blow a visit, but I've got a boy who just, I won't name the school, he just came back from really good Division 1 top 50 school official visit, and then it just kind of went cold after that. And I know the inside. I talked to the coach, and I knew who else he's going after, and it's because better players in his mind came up even after the official visit. So I would say a large percentage of the time, into the 80s or 90s, an official visit means that it's yours to lose, but not always. There's 2 or 3 examples that I've given now of how an official visit can go sideways on you, and then nothing happens. Can happen.
What would your advice be for players who are in their senior fall season and they still don't have a commitment from a college coach?
I would say, what have you been doing? Who have you been talking to? What have you been? Okay, so I have a phone call last night with a 2023 who I I've seen play. I know the coach. I know the coaching style of the team. I know how the team plays. The player has all of the signs of being able to play at least uh, at least a bottom third Division One and middle to top third Division Two and top third, middle to top third NAIA, um, at least, at least. And she's a 2023 and nothing has happened. And so it's one of the questions that I ask. So what is going on? Why are we talking in December, on December 16th, and then nothing's happened? Um, and it can be, in her particular case, it was not sure she wanted to play in college and now is sure. Other kids, it's because they're chasing the wrong schools. They're still waiting for Stanford to give them an answer. They're still waiting for but they invited me to their camp, so they must be still recruiting. Or they wouldn't have invited. They know I'm a 2023, and they just invited me to their winter camp. They must still be recruiting. They can't be done, or they wouldn't invite me to their camp. And so they're still chasing under that assumption. And there is probably some look, I think if a professional level player decided that they wanted to enter college, so a Jack Harrison type on the guy's side decided they wanted to enter college, or somebody that's very high level, and for whatever reason they decided they wanted to go to college, almost every college in the country would figure out a way to make that work. If they thought that this player was going to be a top 3 or 4 player on their team and be a difference maker in their season, then they will figure out a way to make it work. I've seen it firsthand. I had a girl, and I never expected this, but she was playing for me at junior college. Her name was Sharifa Sumela, and we knew she was special. Everybody that played against her could clearly see she was extremely special. And she had a Ghanan national team background, youth national team background, had played in 2 World Cups, under 17s and under 18s, World Cups. And the Florida State gave her an offer of everything. Plus, it was the first year that they were allowed to give up to $5,000 expenses to them, in addition to housing and tuition and food. And so she was going to go to school for Florida State for nothing, plus $5,000 cash. They had just won the national title. How does that happen in January, which is when it happened? And it's because big schools can figure out that their resources are so massive that they can figure out how to move money around, and things happen, and they had room. And at the same time, being chased by North Carolina, by UCLA, by USC, by Washington, and big schools can move money around. So it's not to say that a school's ever really done recruiting. It's that you are, at best, we think you are only a role player on this team. And I don't need another role player. I don't need another. I always say a coach doesn't need anybody's help really finding number 17, 18, 19, 20, 30 on their roster. They have plenty of those. What they're looking for is a 1 through 11. If we want to stretch a little bit, a 1 through 15. A player who will actually play and make impacts in our games. And so when a coach is telling a player, we're done recruiting, we don't have any more room, what they're really saying is, you're not going to help us. But it's a nicer way of saying it.
So I've heard that situation many times. I've talked to a lot of people on Twitter, people who have emailed me, and they said that they get to senior year and they have nowhere to go. There's no commitment. and the coaches are kind of just saying, yeah, like you can just like apply to the school and like get in and like maybe walk on. And I'm just thinking, dang, are they just being nice and kind of leading them on? Is that what's really happening? Like it doesn't sound like they truly want the player.
Yes, and trying to be I believe coaches are nice people in general. I think that they've chosen a profession in which they're dealing with young lives, and I think most coaches are kind and don't, and I think most human beings don't like to hurt other human beings. And so yes, they kind of lead them on a little bit. I don't think it's trying to be cruel and lead them on, but they definitely don't know what the future holds. So we can get into spring seasons, uh, and then you can lose players very quickly. I have been in the situation more than once, multiple times, where you have your end of the season meetings in December before the kids go home. How's it going? Great. You having fun here? Yes. Class is going well? Fantastic. You seem to get along with everybody? Love the team. Kid goes home for Christmas break. You get this text on January 7th. Hey, coach, I'm not coming back. Oh, crud. Didn't see that coming. So then we go to the well and we say, okay, who do I have coming? And so that can happen at any time throughout the entire spring. So we have 5 months of this happening to coaches at various stages. So a kid can go make their own decision. A kid can, in the spring, they were angels in the fall, and now they've been pulled over 4 times by campus police for being drunk in the spring because there's more freedom now, right? There's less things to do. There's little less structure. And there's a little more free time. You aren't so focused on having to win this weekend. You aren't traveling on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The a very typical rule in college is a 48-hour rule. 48 hours before any team event, you're not allowed to imbibe. Okay, in drugs or alcohol, well, drugs, whatever. But marijuana is legal for certain ages, so I guess so. But you're not allowed to yeah. So kids now don't have, and during the season, that's almost impossible for a 72-hour rule. It's almost impossible during the season, but it's not in the off season impossible. So kids, well, I technically didn't break, but then you get called into the AD's office 2 or 3 times, and the coach is being, hey, what's wrong with your kid? And now you don't want the kid to come back. So that stuff happens. Grades happen. Family tragedies happen. All kinds of stuff can go wrong. Injuries, right? If I lose a kid to an ACL in the spring, that kid is no good for the fall. So now what do? Now I got to bring in another player. So this goes on all the way through. I had a talk with Ryan Jordan on the field in June, less than 2 months before his kids reporting about needing a center back a few years back. Now, this is UCLA. It can happen to any school at any time at any level. So sometimes they're going to hang on to these kids a little bit and try to keep them on the hook as long as possible. Other times, they just don't want to tell a kid no. It's just that just either just ignore a kid than to tell them no. Kind of human nature. Why did people break up with each other on text message? It's not polite. It's not the right thing to do.
Well, my question is for players who aren't committed senior year is it worth taking that gamble and hoping for this school that you like really want to go to that players quit the team or someone might get injured or someone just gets off the team? Like, is it worth waiting for that scenario to happen or to go to a school that has been begging you to play there, but it's not your first pick?
Yeah, so I'm going to try to. I'm on Twitter every bit as much as anybody, I think, and I read a lot of what people say about this topic, and so I'm going to try to help us in this little episode, Erica, cover every scenario so people don't go, "Yeah, what about?" Right? So there are some things that we cannot compromise. If I want to be a literal rocket scientist, and that's something specific that I want to be working for SpaceX, or I want to be dealing with up there. That's my passion. Uh, and then you're chasing MIT, and you're chasing Carnegie Mellon, and you're chasing all these big engineering schools, and it's just nothing happening. Those are probably bad examples, but you're chasing Wisconsin, and you're chasing Stanford, and you're chasing UCLA. So you're chasing the big engineering schools, but you're ignoring Embry-Riddle, okay, which will absolutely get you exactly where you want to be and is extremely well recognized in that world because, oh, it's the one in Florida is a D2 school, and the one in Arizona is an NAIA, and I don't want to play NAIA. I'm too. So you're allowing the soccer bit to thoroughly control where you want to go. And I think in the case of a rocket scientist, it's probably a mistake. But in the case of a soccer coach, maybe it's not a mistake, right? If that's what I want to be with my life as a soccer coach, then, the soccer kind of drives what you do, right? In which case, you better be playing soccer somewhere. Uh, and so kids have to decide at what point, at some point. Girls are a little different than guys. Girls, there are more pathways, there's more schools, there's more roster spots available. And for quality female players that are completely dedicated to the sport like a college coach wants them to be, there are probably less of those considering the amount of spots available. So we can say that there is a shortage of really good female players. Okay. We at SRUSA have far more male applicants than we have female applicants because males find it much more difficult to find a place to play than the females do. On the female side, we have about 12%, according to the NCAA, that are coming from another country. On the male side, we have over 30% that are coming in from another country. So we have this bigger pool of male players for less available spots. So it is, women can tend to wait even longer if they want to and still have a place to play. They just often don't want to go to that school that's still available to them, right? They don't want to take that pathway to that school, so they'll have a decision to make. And I would say that to both men and women, to both boys and girls, that if they can find, and this is common advice, if they can find a list of NAIA and Division III and Division II schools, and maybe even some of the better junior colleges in the country to use as their plan Bs and Cs, instead of just hanging on to only the big D1 schools and or smaller D1s, there are small schools in this country that will give you a very good education that are operating under the D1 banner, but it's not the big name that kids want to go to. So be honest with yourself. What is most important to you? And prioritize those things.
You've talked about in the past how players should really get clear on if they want to be impact players, they want to be in the starting 11, as opposed to just being a roster spot. And I think most players would say, yes, I want to get a lot of minutes in college. And sometimes that means that, you might not be going to your number one school. And I have to bring up Hopkins women's soccer and what happened this year with all the graduate transfers using their COVID years. I mean, no one really saw that coming. And I looked at a lot of the girls who had started and played in 2021, they got no minutes this year because of all of the transfers coming in who were impact players. So stuff like that can happen too. And I'm sure, you know, those girls were happy they won a national championship and the team was really amazing this year. But to go from being a starter and playing every game to not at all, that has to make you feel a certain way.
What's important to you, right? I think it was my one of my licenses. I think it might have been my B license. I was with in my group had a young man who had played for Virginia, and he was there during the Bruce Arena days, and they had won national championships, and it felt like at that time half the U.S. national team was from Virginia, and a good chunk of them were, and he was very honest, and he said, I never played. I didn't play any minutes all my 4 years. And I said, what a bummer. He goes, not really. I goes, I would have done it all over again. To be able to train and to be part of this group and to be with these amazing players who were playing with the national team was everything that I ever, dreamed of, being with these players. Even if I wasn't directly playing, the way I was treated, the way that Bruce treated all of us that weren't playing, we felt like we were part of the team and he was happy. And I've often thought about him and thought, what percentage of kids would be willing to do that? We think about Ryan Saylor, who had, think it was a grand total, if I'm not mistaken, of 30 minutes playing time before his senior year for University of Washington when they made that big run last year. And now I think Ryan's playing in the USL, got picked up, got drafted, and then got put with an affiliate club. And he's playing professionally. But prior to that, he had not played. I've thought many times, how many of us, including myself, would have run from that situation by our sophomore year and not stuck it out? And then I posted recently that I'm talking about myself, and I'm talking about my own son, and I'm talking about some of the players that I've coached where no, we wouldn't have stuck that out. We wanted to play. Even if it meant I had to drop down a level, I wanted to play. I came to college to play soccer. That's really the only reason why I'm here. There is a decent number of kids in this world that the reason they got an education, the reason they graduated from high school, the reason that they graduated from college was because they wanted to continue to play. They weren't ready to give up the game and they couldn't figure out another way to do it. So that carrot being dangled in front of them is playing, and that drove them to get their degree. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't care why you get your degree. It's a good thing to have as a backup plan for your life. As I've told many kids, even if you want to dig trenches for a living, if that's what you dig, literally and figuratively, if that's what drives you, is that what you love doing? If you do it with a degree, at least if you decide that you want to do something else, you will have something that employers recognize as more than high school. So, depends what a player wants, right? Depends what's really driving them. That's coming back to what I said. Be honest with yourself and prioritize your list of what is negotiable and what's non-negotiable.
Now, I want to shift gears a bit because I got a very interesting text the other day, and I had never heard of this scenario. And I'll keep it anonymous, but this one coach texted me in a panic, and he said that one of the girls that he trained had committed to a college, and then admissions came back and didn't let her into the school. So now she can't play at this college, even though she committed. I don't know what was going on with that situation, but was it she gave a verbal commitment and then her grades weren't good enough to get into the school and now she has to look at elsewhere? Is this a common scenario that we need to look out for?
It does happen, but we have schools in this country that have a 4% acceptance rate, And then we have schools in the country that have 100% acceptance rate. So that scenario would never happen to a school with a 100% acceptance rate. When I coached at Cal State, I think the Cal States are all still the same. When I was at Cal State East Bay, 2.8 GPA is what you needed to get into the school, to get accepted into the Cal State system. Now we have certain Cal States that have higher acceptance rates than other Cal States. And then we have the UC system, which is a different set of acceptance rates. And then we have private schools like Stanford who have a 4% acceptance rate, or Caltech that has a 4% acceptance rate. And Caltech does not care whether you are Motri or Messi or anybody else that you consider a high level. They don't care. It's if you can get into the school academically, great. Then if the coach wants you, great. But there are schools in this country where a lot of kids are hoping, they've heard the old stories that, this basketball player or this football player was able to get into a school when they didn't meet the academic requirements of the school. And then they're hoping that it's them. And they're hoping that their sport pushes them over the top and into that acceptance category. But there are schools in this country where that doesn't work no matter what. Was this one of those schools? I don't know. And my advice to kids is still the same, that I had an academic counselor use this line to me one time, and I said, oh, that's a good one. I'd never thought about that. You need to let your grades get you into any school in the world or in the United States. Let your grades get you in, and then the sport will sort itself out after that if that's what you want. You shouldn't be depending on your sport to get you into the schools that you want to go into. I think that's a big gamble, and I think that your example is a solid example of why that's a bad gamble. Depending on the school, right?
I
Depending on the
think it
school.
was a pretty high level school, and from what I understood, the GPA wasn't as high as it could be. It might have been average, and then the SAT score was a little below average. But I really like that advice to have your grades allow you to get into any school. And if you guys want to see an episode we did on getting good grades and college soccer with Don and also Steve Rollins, check it out in the link below. It's super important that you have that academic piece. And to Don's point, can a player get into a high level school without good grades? Well, maybe, but they might have to be a national player. And that's a very rare scenario. Would you say it might happen with like these like top players, Don, or would they still have to have the 4.0 and a good SAT score?
So the way it was described to me from a top 5 academic school on US News and Report coach, so you can look it up and you figure it's just one of those, is that they had 2 exceptions and the players had to be close. And he was laying it out to me in terms of SAT scores. And he said, look, our minimum here is 1,500. That's the minimum. If I have a kid at 1,380, I'm not even going to ask admissions. But if I have a kid come in at 1,460, then I can ask. And they give me 2 of those a year. 2 of those a year. And that's it. So the question is, if I'm that coach, is this the player that I'm going to gamble that one of my 2 on, that I'm going to use? Is this kid?
So let's come back to some things that the player should be doing on their end when the coach does express interest. They're continuing to ask for their schedule, they're going on an official visit. What are some things the player can do to really like leave a good impression and to make sure that they're showing their character and their interest in that school?
So step one is to be sure that you have been actually evaluated. Okay. If you've if a player has never been evaluated in person, uh, then chances are that they're just being strung along. Okay. But once a player has figured out how to be evaluated in person, so I always say every player wants a yes, a no, or a maybe. Yes, you can come. No, you can't. Maybe. How do I turn that coach into a yes or a no? I think many players, Erica, are too timid, understandably so. They're teenagers, but they're too timid with coaches and they're afraid to ask questions that may lead to answers that they don't want to hear. So they'd rather imagine that everything is going to work out fine and that coach is just doing. So the first thing that I wanted, and I can only speak for myself, right? And through other friends that we've shared ideas with, other coaching friends in college that share ideas with. And I want a player to be frank with me, and I want to be frank with them. We want to be honest with each other. For Pete's sake, we're building what could be a 4-year relationship with each other or a 5-year relationship with each other. That's a long commitment to someone, to another human being. And knowing that that player is going to be part of the team that decides whether I get to stay at my job or whether I will be moving on from my job. Okay. So I want the kids to be honest. I think the first thing kids need to do, if you go to a camp, you should, and you're a junior or a senior, coach, do you see me fitting into your team? Coach, where do you, if it's yes, I do, where do you see me fitting in a team? In or out of the top 15? Where do you see me fitting in? That's a scary question to ask because if you get an honest answer, it might be not what you want to hear. But the quicker you have your answer, the quicker you can make a decision to move on or to keep pursuing that school. Erica, being recruited is very much, it's a relationship. And I liken it quite often to dating and engagement and marriage. Okay. So if you're at the dating stage where you're all dating different people, but you're still seeing each other maybe once a month or once every 3 weeks, and you're going on 3-4 dates, but neither of you are ready to commit to being in a committed relationship of monogamy, right? Then if you're not at that stage yet, that's the stage that we're talking about originally, where it's you get some communications with coaches, but nobody's ready to commit to a monogamy. Then we have the state where you're in a monogamous relationship, but you're still not engaged to be married. So in other words, you're number one on the coach's board. That coach is number 2 or 3 on your list in that top. And so you're wooing each other back and forth, but you're also wooing kind of with these other schools back and forth in your own mind. You're trying to figure out where this goes, but you're not broadcasting yourself out to everybody, right? So it's starting to get serious. And now we get to the point where, are we going to get engaged or are we not? Okay. Coaches, how people woo each other in that process is very much like dating. So when you get to this point where you're spending more money on that person and you really want to make a good impression and you're really putting yourself out there emotionally and you're opening yourself up into the pieces of your life that you really don't share with everybody, and you're starting to really get to know each other. When that coach gets to that point with you and you get to that point with the coach and that coach decides they really want you, it will be quite clear that they really want you. They will call you every legal opportunity that they can. They will start asking questions like, what's it going to take to get you to commit to us? When is this going to happen? And then Some coaches get very insecure and they put deadlines on you. Sometimes those deadlines just have to be made, especially if you're getting into late winter and early spring of your senior year. Those commitments got to be made. That coach is getting very nervous about being able to fulfill their roster with the players that they want. And they do have a player B and a player C. And if you say no, they will go to the player B and C. Sometimes they will make the same offer to two players at the same time. And that's almost like a, you know, like a, oh, I don't know how to say it. Maybe like a gunfight. It's who pulls the trigger first is the one who gets in, and the other one is out. Uh, Now, doesn't mean that the coach won't take that other player, but it means there's no athletic money left for your position. So, oh, and sometimes there's no roster spot left. Sometimes, uh, so don't know if that answers the question or if I got sidetracked.
I think you just gave really fantastic life advice in general and just really encouraging people to ask the hard questions because it can save you a lot of time and investment in the long run. And you can know where a college coach stands or someone you're dating stands. And it's funny because I knew I wanted to marry my current fiance like 3 months in, and we were very clear early on. And I think it's good to be honest, you know. And as far as the college recruiting realm, it's important for players to be direct with their questions. And I'm so glad you said that they should ask where they potentially fit in, or does the coach even see them fitting in? Too often I have players just ask for basic feedback after an ID camp, and then the coach will email them back all these vague things like, oh, you know, you need to move forward quicker, or you need to work on this first touch, and the player's like, well, do you want me or not? And it's like, well, you should have just asked that right off the bat to save yourself some time. And maybe if they don't want you, it's going to hurt, but then you'll be able to pivot and go for a school that does want you. So I'm really glad you said that, Don. That's super important to remind everyone of.
Here's a scenario, real life, happened on a conversation last night with uh, with a young lady, and she said that she went to a camp that is a one of the top 50 most desirable schools in the country. It's almost on almost every kid's list. It academically ticks a lot of the boxes for most kids. Location wise, it blows most schools out of the water. Facility wise, unbelievable. And weather wise, you know, where it's located, it's unbelievable. And then the soccer is very good. And she said the coaches told her that she was the best player at the camp. And so to a player, well, then you must want me. And I've had players that have told me I'm who's the best player at the camp, but then no offer comes and they can't figure out why. It's because of the who they're playing against and with. So if I was terrible on the field, Erica. I was awful. But in junior high school, I had been playing soccer for 2 or 3 years in an area where almost nobody played soccer. And when I went out to PE, they were calling me Twinkle Toes. I had never been called that before. They thought I was magic with my feet. They thought that what I could do with the ball was unbelievable. And I really wasn't a very good soccer player. I was a goalkeeper. I wasn't a field player. I really wasn't very good. But compared to them, I was the best player at the school. Think about that. When you go to a camp, why are you the best player at the camp because you're the best player they've ever seen? Or are you the best player at the camp because the players you remember that camps are open invite? And there are kids that are going to camps that honestly cannot use their left foot or their off foot to save their life. There are kids at a camp that really they couldn't hit a target at 25 yards if you gave them 20 chances with no pressure. They couldn't hit it, right? There are kids at camps that their first touch is like it's coming off of a brick wall every single time, right? But they're at that same camp. So by comparison, you can be the best player at the camp camp. And camps by design, by NCAA rules, have to allow anybody who signs up for that camp to go to that camp. They cannot restrict and say you're not good enough to come to the camp. They can't do invitations. Coaches can manipulate it, and then somebody's going to hear this and go, "Yeah, well, you can manipulate it by telling kids that the camp opens up on, uh, you know, December 18th, but opens up at midnight on December 18th. They didn't leave that part out, and then all of their preferred campers will sign up at midnight, and by 6 a.m. on the 18th, the camp is full." And so they can manipulate it, but let's face it, that it's exactly what I said. It's manipulating. It's skirting the rules. It's finding ways to bend the rules without breaking them. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about most camps in most situations in most areas where 100 kids show up to the camp because the coaches are using that camp. If we find a player, great. But my assistant coach makes $1,200 a year, $12,000 a year, and they need to feed their family. They need to be able to find a way to live in, I don't know, Los Angeles or wherever. And it's expensive. And I need to pay my coaches or I won't have any coaches. And they have to use these camps to feed their own families. So that's the majority of camps in the country, of college camps in the country. And now there's always going to be exceptions. There's a small NAIA school in Alaska that the only way that they'll ever have the budget to be able to see kids is to get kids to come to their camps, right? And then they will select players from those camps, and they will go to every exact camp that they can go to, and they will find players at those camps. And they are smaller private schools quite often, or smaller public schools, or out of the way schools, or schools in remote locations that kids generally aren't attracted to. So they've got to go out and get in front of the kids. The kids aren't coming to them. So they've got to go use these third-party camps, or they've got to use their own camps. Now, there are those schools out there, absolutely. But when I see kids' lists, it's generally not the schools on the list that I see.
That's so true. "You're the best one at the camp" quote. It's like I've heard that so often from players saying that, and it's like, well, there were like 80 to 100 girls there. Like who was there, and who are we comparing to? But what if a player was told, "Well, you're the best player at the camp. I want you to come back to the next camp next season." Is that the coach saying, "Okay, we really do think you're the best player, we want you," or is that just them, like, wanting money for the camp? Like, what are your thoughts? I feel like that situation could go any direction.
I feel like it could go any direction too. So, what year is the player we're talking about? If the player is a sophomore, like in their sophomore year, or a freshman, and they go to a camp and they say, "I want you to come back," could mean that they're tracking your progress.
Mhm.
My son my son coming out of high school ended up being recruited by Sonoma State. So my friend Marcus Ziemer has coached at Sonoma State for, I don't know, 100 years. Been a long time. Uh, they've won a national championship. My son went to the Franz Hook camp at Sonoma State, probably freshman, sophomore, junior, maybe senior year. I don't remember. Probably only junior year. He went maybe eighth grade year. He went 4 or 5 years in a row, right? He had been seen by Marcus Ziemer probably 30 times. In the spring of his senior year, Sonoma State had just won the national championship, Division II, and he was invited with a group of select players to come play with and against the players from Sonoma State, which you can do at the Division II level. You can do that. And so now we're probably talking 7 times before he was offered a roster spot. That they had seen him, been around him, tracked him, seen him again. I mean, it was a lot of interaction. Marcus is very calculating with who he wants to have in his team. So there's that scenario that because my son was younger, yeah, keep coming back, keep coming back, keep coming back. But he was learning at the camps. He was getting better. He was bringing back information. He was improving. There was a value to it. Camps have changed. Camps have changed now to purely an ID tool. So we'll play you. You'll do a warm up. You'll play maybe small sided 7v7 or something, and then you'll play 11v11. And there's no teaching, and we're just evaluating. That's all we're doing. Camps have changed into that, so that affects what kids should and shouldn't be doing. I think it's fair to say by your junior year, and definitely by the beginning of your senior year, if you're still getting invited back to camps, that you ask that question I said. Well, I can't pay for, and it's all coaches know this, but it's okay to say this. I can't afford to pay for every camp that's invited me. You are one of my top 3 schools. Okay. And if the school's your number one, tell them that you're my number one. And will I fit in here? Do you want me? Will you be recruiting me? And if it's a maybe, coach, how do I change that to a yes or a no so that I can move on? So that I'm not dragging this out into, June of my senior year.
I love that, and I think asking those hard questions up front, so you don't wait a year or 2 and then you get into your senior year and it's too late and you have no option. So that's really good for everyone to hear. This has been great, Dawn, and I'm gonna actually link. I don't know how many episodes we've done. I think it's like 4 or 5. I'll link all of those in the caption below. We actually, in one of the episodes, we dive into more of the details of ID camps and how to stand out there. So be sure to check out that episode. We talk about the differences between divisions, different academic requirements. So I'm sure we'll be able to answer all of your questions. The episodes are about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes long. So turn them on in the car ride to a tournament or to a camp, and hopefully you'll get some good takeaways from them. So Dawn, thank you again. I'm sure you'll be back, and it's a pleasure as always.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate you allowing us to educate kids and families. I love it.
Of course, we're happy to have you. And guys, again, check out those episodes, and we will see you on the next episode.